Welcome back to another episode of the One Tree Hill Rewatch here on the Filmaholic channel. I'm Matthew, and today we're going to be discussing 4 episodes in Season 4 of One Tree Hill. We're on the second half of the season now, so we are approaching the end of the high school years. I really can't believe it's coming up so fast during this rewatch that I'm moving right along. We're almost to Season 5, so it's incredible. Which excites me because that's when I started going to Wilmington to watch filming. Was mainly Season 6, but I did go twice in Season 5, so I did see some stuff I can bring my experience to the talk there. Unfortunately, these high school years, I wasn't able to go to Wilmington and watch filming. Unfortunately, because I could have saw a lot of stuff and envy people who were there from the beginning and got to see a lot of stuff early on, especially some of these cast members that don't come back as regulars moving forward, obviously, some of the appearance and whatnot. But the first episode we're going to talk about here today is 411, Everything in Its Right Place. And this episode aired, it was the mid-season premiere of Season 4. It aired January 17th, 2007, was written by Don Urbont, who only wrote this one episode of the show, and was directed by Michael Lang, who directed 3 episodes, and this is the second of his 3 episodes during his time on One Tree Hill. It's interesting too that if you watch the DVD, which I have all the DVDs. When I started doing the rewatch, we were actually watching it on Hulu, but then I was like, no, I want to do it. I want to watch my DVDs. Don't want to actually watch what I paid for, and. Which is interesting, too, because I don't know. I remember back when One Tree Hill was on Netflix, there was a scene in the finale that was actually cut from the Netflix version. I don't know why. It was just shortened a little bit. So to get the full amount, I'm watching the DVDs, and I like that. But they kept in the DVD the intro that Hillary Burton and Sophia Bush did when it actually aired on TV, which I think is interesting because there's other episodes like the school shooting and whatnot that didn't keep those intros or after parts of the episode. So I'm surprised they actually kept that, but it was a nice little touch. This episode, though, episode 411, is actually one of my least favorite, if not my least favorite episode of Season 4. Just not a lot of things happen in this episode that really excite me or interest me that much. The main thing I feel like about this episode is Rachel and Brooke and them stealing the calculus exam, which I'm not a big fan of that storyline in general in the season, or Brooke's storyline in the season at all, and her friendship with Rachel. I'm not a fan of any of that, so this episode just wasn't for me because of all of that. But they steal the exam because Brooke, who doesn't want to steal the exam at first, she fails another exam and realizes she needs to do something, so she steals the exam instead of going to Haley to get tutoring from the beginning. So yeah, that happens. Principal Turner catches them in the school, so they have to come up with an alibi, which leads us back into this stupid clean team storyline, which I still can't believe they had in the show. It's awful. But I also want to talk about this, and I'm going to talk about it over the next, pretty much the rest of this season, because he's in quite a bit of episodes. And it's Principal Turner, who has been here since the pilot. He's obviously the principal in the show, but the same actor has been the Principal Turner since the pilot. He stayed with the show. And the character is just written very weird. He's very accusing to everyone in every scene that he's in. It's like he just feels like this character has no compassion, really. Very poorly written character, in my opinion, throughout the course of the first 4 seasons. And not very good performance either. But I don't know if I blame the actor completely on that. And I know this is a smaller character, so I don't care, but it is a recurring character. So we see him a lot, and he acts the same in every scene with almost every character. And I don't really know if that's the direction or just the actor. Probably both. Probably actors acting like this, and the director is just not changing it. And I feel like something should have happened. He's just super weird in this season to me. In this scene when he sees them in the hallway, they're dressed weird, in these cat suits. So I guess that's a little suspicious. But just the fact that they're at the school late, he's at the school late too, and I don't really know why. he's still there. But, maybe he's just there to close the school because there are the clean team meeting, could be other meetings of the school. But if he saw Rachel and Brooke there, maybe he could just ask them where they're headed, because maybe they are going to one of those meetings. But instead, in the scene, he's very accusing, very straightforward that he knows they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing. Just awful. And then as we get into a few more episodes, when we get to 14, I'll talk about a little bit more of how accusing he is to Brooke and to other characters as well. And we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, the clean teens situation, Brooke and Rachel have to join the clean teens as an alibi. So they bring Shelley back in this episode, who was at the beginning of the season with Brooke. Just one of the worst parts of the season. Lucas is struggling in this episode as well. Obviously, he saw Keith in 410, and, he's struggling with that fact that Keith may not have been killed by Jimmy, or at least he may have hinted that he wasn't killed by Jimmy, and Lucas is trying to understand all this, and he's trying to get help with Peyton, and Peyton's actually understanding and talking about ghosts and dreams and messages and all that. But she's also struggling in this episode too, as far as their PDA, and not just really their PDA, but her kissing him in general, because of everything that's bad that's happened in her life, and she feels like she's cursed. Ultimately, that's resolved by the end of this episode, and they do kiss in front of everyone at school, and their relationship is back to normal, and that's great. And he's one step closer to solving this mystery with Keith. Dan is still in jail in this episode when it starts, and he doesn't want to plead non-guilty. He wants to be guilty and go to prison, take the blame for Nathan. And then his lawyer ends up coming to him, and he gets released from prison because it turns out Dante was killed in the crash. He wasn't killed by Nathan, which on a rewatch is kind of obvious, but like I said before in the other video, if you were those characters in that moment, you would think that Nathan had killed him as well, and to protect Nathan, Dan did what he had to do. So Nathan still, he's thinking that Dan might have paid the coroner off. Dan's like, if you take one word from me, the rest of your life, take this. You did not kill that man. I don't want you to think that and go your life thinking that. Nathan also admits to Haley the truth, because Haley's feeling guilty, or not guilty, but she wants Dante's family to know that she doesn't blame him, because she thinks it's an accident. She's also upset that Dan could have done something like that. So Nathan tells her everything, the whole truth. She gets mad and goes to Karen's. By the end of the episode, Nathan goes and convinces her to come back, and they're in love. So she goes back. But during this visit, Karen actually sees Nathan's hand, which I don't know how Haley didn't see his hand beforehand and wonder what happened. I wish they had put that conversation in there too, because I feel like he had to have lied to her about that, because what do you think happened to his knuckles? But anyways, Karen sees that, so she kind of knows the truth and then goes and approaches Dan about it. But when she goes to approach Dan, it's also the moment he had just came home and someone has broken into his house while he's in prison or in jail, and posted everything about him being a murderer on the wall, which she comes in and rips off because she thinks it's in response to Dante, not Keith. So there's a nice little scene between them there, and her seeing someone that she used to know, talking about a younger version of Dan. Really like that. Deb also breaks out of rehab in this episode. Remember in the last one, Karen dropped her off at rehab. She thinks this is a not a voluntary rehab. She thinks that she has to break out, and that is a funny scene. I kind of get annoyed with Deb. I get annoyed to do with Deb throughout the season, but that was a funny scene with her trying to escape, and then the nurse saying, all you had to do was sign out, which she does, and she leaves rehab. And the final thing about this episode is Gigi breaks up with Mouth. It feels like they just started dating the last episode. I guess it was a little bit ago, but she breaks up with him because he's going off to college soon, and she's a sophomore. And really, their whole thing was them being those announcements, doing the commentary of the basketball games together, and now that's over, so they don't really have as much time to spend together. So this is their last little moment together until we actually see her again before the end of the season. She helps Mouth out with something, but then of course she comes back later in season 6. The next episode we have is 412, Resolve. This episode aired January 24th, 2007. It was directed by Maria Kelly. This is her second and final episode as a director on the show, and it was written by Michelle Furtney Goodman, and which was her only episode that she wrote. I do find a little upsetting. A lot of the female writers on the show, they come in and they write one episode, and then you don't see a lot of them coming back to write more episodes. And I do think that probably has something to say about the environment working with Mark, Schwann, and that's disappointing because there is a lot of guy writers who do come back. And the Mike Hero and David Strauss and a couple of the other ones they are good, and I'm glad they came back, but it's disappointing seeing some of the female writers not have a chance to come back. And maybe it was their own decision, but you can't help but wonder if that was part of the environment of the writer's room. So this episode, the main part of it is Haley struggling to find a prom dress. She's obviously pregnant, but she's also been hit by a car, so she's on crutches and everything. So she's trying to find a dress to wear, and they don't really have the money for her to go out and buy one. So Nathan is trying to get the money, and Skills proposes this stripping contest that they can do to get money. So they end up doing that in the episode. That's the big point of the episode, which is really cool because you get to see Mouth dance again. Skills gets afraid at first, and then Bevan talks him into coming out there, and they all dance, and it's a really fun moment. Chase is introduced in this episode, Stephen Colletti's first episode of the show. I'm not a huge... I like Stephen. He's really cool. I met him in person as well as most of the other cast, but I'm not a huge Chase fan. I do like him better in the later seasons, I'll admit, especially him and Mia and their, I guess, relationship on the show. Not a Brace fan, not a Brooke and Chase fan, but he's introduced in this episode, and Brooke likes him, and he's a part of the Clean Teen stuff too, which I think is stupid, and just the whole storyline I can't stand. But he needs help on his calculus, just needs help in the class, so he sees the grade on her test, which she cheated on, and wants her to tutor him, so she does, which that's not going to work out because she doesn't know calculus. So I don't really know how that was ever supposed to go. Mouth sees Shelley as well in the episode for the first time, which will lead into their storyline, which was a funny little introduction between them, because Brooke is still in the Clean Teens at this moment, still having to wear the shirt around. We continue on the Dan and Karen relationship in this episode, which I really liked seeing develop over the course of the season. And in this episode, they are preparing dinner at the cafe for them, and Deb walks in for some reason and sees them together, and then she starts yelling and causing a scene about how Keith would be rolling over in his grave if he saw the two of them together and all this. And so it's just a real bummer, and Dan leaves and all this. But then Dan goes and sees Deb later, and you could say it's a mean scene, but I think it's a good scene, and it's a well-acted scene too. But Dan goes and talks to Deb, and more of this adding to the backstory of Dan and you understanding his character. He goes and sees Deb at her house, pours water on her, and there's this little back and forth that we always have with Dan and Deb. And he admits to her that he always loved Karen, and that the night before their wedding, he actually drove to Tree Hill and slept out in front of Karen's house, and he was going to tell her the truth, but then he didn't. So she tells him how much of a miserable son of a bitch he is, and how her and Nathan are better off without him. And he's like, well, Nathan left you long before I did. He's off on his own. He's doing his own thing, which this breaks her down, and she goes and tries to see Nathan too. Knocks Haley down. Nathan tells her to stay the hell away. And ultimately, by the end of the episode, Deb ODs. She tries to kill herself, which is a very sad scene, and a good scene in the show between her and Paul Johansson, or her and Dan. Paul Johansson's performance too, and always in every episode. But Barbara Allen Woods as well in this episode. But she calls him, and it's the back and forth between them. Dan at first, but then until he realizes what's actually happening, and he ends up going there. And this is good, connects back to an earlier episode when he told her that he didn't care if she OD'd and all this, but he really does care. I mean, she is a big part of his life, even if they are divorced at this point. So she doesn't die. Obviously, he goes to the house and gets the police, and she's taken to the hospital. But then he also goes to have dinner with Karen. She invited him over for dinner, and they have dinner at the end of the episode. And he doesn't tell her the truth. I don't think he really wants her to be bothered by the whole Deb situation. I don't think it's something that he was any kind of evil plan. I think it was genuinely he didn't want to upset her over the Deb situation. But in that scene, which will connect to another scene I'm going to go back to real quick, earlier in the episode, Karen and Lucas, we check in with them and them son and mother relationship that they have, and how she approves of his relationship with Peyton. But in that scene as well, he admits to her that he saw Keith while he was unconscious, and that he doesn't think Jimmy killed Keith. And she gets really upset about it. And at the end of the episode, she admits to Dan what had happened with Lucas, and that Lucas doesn't think Jimmy killed Keith, which is the big little cliffhanger of this episode, because then Dan's like, oh, what? Out of the blue, he wouldn't expect that to happen, and now that probably also rings bells with the whole whoever's doing this to Dan's house and whatnot. Could Lucas have talked to whoever knows about the situation with Keith? We don't know, and that's left at a little cliffhanger at the end of the episode, which takes us into the next one, which is 413, Pictures of You. This episode aired February 7th, 2007, was directed by Les Butler and written by creator of the show, Mark Schwann. This is actually a really solid episode. Although the opening with the teacher is a bit awkward, and I don't think this would ever... I don't know, the way that he's written at first, you're like, oh, this is kind of like the cool teacher, it's kind of believable. But then as you get into more of him talking about the 5 categories, you're like, this definitely would not happen in a high school, which I do slightly have a problem with that. So this episode in general kind of feels like it's a John Hughes inspired episode. It feels like they took heavy influence from say The Breakfast Club or whatever. Not that it's structured like that, but I just feel like that's what they were trying to go for, was a John Hughes inspired episode, which was nice. They even got, for the teacher, Carl the janitor from Breakfast Club to play the teacher in this. What I have a problem with is, since they were taking that, you would think that they would sort of take those 5 categories of high schoolers from the Breakfast Club and then apply it to this episode, or make it modern. But they kind of took 4 of the 5 from Breakfast Club and then switched... So who did they switch out? They switched, I guess you would say Bender, who was the criminal, because I guess you're switching Loner, Basket Case in the Breakfast Club to Loner in this one, and then you got the Basket Case, which is now a Loner. You got Nerd, Prom Queen, Jock, and instead of keeping the criminal, you switched it with Friendly, which means they say slut in the episode, which I wasn't a fan of that. I feel like they could have came up with a different 5th category for high schoolers than Friendly. But once again, look at who wrote the episode. But anyway, so they do that, and the assignment is to break off into partners and get to know the other partner. You're going to come back at the end and tell the class what you learned about your partner, and you're going to take a picture that's going to go in the yearbook that represents how you see your partner. So we have Lucas and Glenda, Skills and Haley, Rachel and Bevan, Mouth and Shelley, Nathan and Peyton, and Brooke and Chase. And Peyton was actually supposed to be with Chase, and Brooke was supposed to be with Nathan, but they switched cards because of Peyton. So the first one we're going to talk about here is just the Lucas and Glenda one, which Glenda's one of those characters that I thought was going to be a 1-episode character in Season 3, and they ended up bringing her back in Season 4. And I actually do like her character, and especially like her character interactions with Lucas. It's a nice little friendship that's added into the season of the show, and gives him a chance to, person he ends up letting read his novel first and get some feedback. I wish they'd actually brought Glenda back in the later seasons. I know they don't. And it kind of makes sense because she wanted to get the hell out of Tree Hill and never come back. But, by the end of the series, I think it would have been cool to revisit. Maybe she came back to Tree Hill or something. I don't know. Especially with, like I've said before, some of the storylines they go into season 8 and whatnot. It's like, I would have rather you went back and revisited some of these other characters and like let us know where they are versus telling some of these stories that you ended up telling. But yeah, so you have Lucas and Glenda, which is a nice little exchange between them I liked. You have Skills and Haley, two characters that have been here from the beginning, but never really had that much screen time together. But you know that they grew up together. So where is that relationship? You get to see it here, and it's another relationship that you see throughout the rest of the season, and that stays throughout the rest of the series, really, because of his relationship with Jamie in the later years. Really like the Skills and Haley stuff, but the only thing about their scenes in 413 that sucks is there's a moment where she's laying on her back and her shirt it's like coming up, and you can see the fake baby bump that they had put on her. And I'm like, how can you not have noticed that when you were filming the episode? First of all, when they were filming the episode, someone should have caught it. Like when they were actually filming it, the director, cinematographer, all of that should have seen it and caught it. But even if it didn't, I can't believe that, because you gotta think that it wasn't like that every shot, right? Maybe it was. So like the editor should have caught it too. It's a huge mistake. But instead, it's just kept in there, and I'm like, the only thing I can think of is that every shot was messed up for some reason, and that they were just like, we don't have the money or time to go back and reshoot it, then so we're gonna have to just go with it. But I can't imagine that being the case with that scene. So that's a bad error in the show. The next relationship or the next nugget of the show is Rachel and Bevan. And I have a bit of another problem with this. A couple little things. One, they go into the bathroom for their part of the episode, and Rachel gets high. Now they do weed on the show. They don't do weed, but they use weed as a storyline, or not a storyline, but a plot device or whatever, several times throughout the series. Comes up again in season 8, season 7, and it's all in different ways. Usually the later parts, I guess, is not bad, especially in season 7, but it felt negative in this episode, like they were saying as a bad thing that Rachel was doing, which I think is odd because these writers have smoked weed, along with most people, but just the way that part is written, and Bevan's like, oh, you're wasted from smoking a joint? What? I don't know. That bugged me, part of that. I did like how they wrote, like, Rachel didn't care about it, and then we get to the end when they take pictures, and I'm not sure if that's supposed to be a double meaning, because Bevan takes the picture and she's like, Rachel realizes I'm not dumb, but like the picture is like blurred and sideways, and I'm not really sure if they're trying to mean like that was a stupid mistake from Bevan, or if it was a how she saw Rachel was like blurred and passing by, like not really in focus, because she doesn't really matter in the course of life. Maybe that's me just looking too deep into that picture. But another thing I don't like about that scene is Rachel and Bevan are talking, and Bevan reveals that she's not actually stupid, because Bevan's been portrayed as stupid the whole time she's on the show, especially season 3 and 4. But she reveals that she's not actually stupid. It's an act that she's putting on to make the other girls feel good. Okay. Don't like that. One, if you're going to do that, fine. But when I see her in the later seasons, she better be successful, or if not, she doesn't have to be uber successful, but she needs to be the version of Bevan in that scene. I don't want to see this high school Bevan that we know in the later seasons. So, and that's what we get in the later seasons. When we see her, she's still playing the same character. Stupid. So was it an act or not? You don't stick with it. The continuity's messed up. So that scene doesn't work for me because I know the course of the series. We also have Nathan and Peyton in the episode. Really like that because we haven't really visited with them together really since, I guess they had a little bit in season 2 when Haley left him, but really since season 1, the boy toy auction, which they bring up in this episode. But their stuff is really good together in this episode because they know each other, deep down because of their past. We also have Mouth and Shelley. I like Mouth, so I can watch these scenes, but I'm not a big Shelley fan. But their back and forth, their relationship in this episode, I actually bought. It's just like the next episode that it goes out the window. And then finally got Brooke and Chase. Chase finds out the truth about Brooke because the teacher, for some reason, reveals that she was failing calculus. So he knows about it, so she has to end up revealing the truth about everything from her stealing the exam and cheating to Rachel's bet about her having sex with Chase. But they get through it all, and by the end of the episode, they're dating. Unfortunately, because I'm not really a big fan of that. But we do have that iconic shot in the show of Brooke in front of the projector with the words written on her, which is a really good shot and scene. But that's 413 pictures of you, and then we're on to the last episode I'm going to talk about today, which is 414 sad songs for dirty lovers. And this episode aired on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2007, was directed by Janice Cook and written by William H. Brown. Like I said, I was going to go back to Principal Turner's a weirdo, still creepy, still being very accusation heavy in this episode and going after Brooke mainly, but whoever, he's acting weird. He's on the search of who stole that calculus exam, which Rachel forgot to return to the tutor center. So they have to redo or take a new pop quiz, which ultimately can't prove anything, even if Brooke was to fail, which she would have. The exam, there's no way to really prove, but in the course of the show, I get looking at the show, it would have happened storyline wise. So whatever. What ends up happening, and this is because Brooke also gets a letter from Victoria's Secret, saying that they want to put Clothes Over Bros in their stores. So, and because of that, Rachel ends up taking the fall for Brooke. She switches their exams and says that she stole the calculus exam and she stole it from Haley. So Rachel ends up getting in trouble. She takes the fall for Brooke. Haley gets fired from the tutor center because it was her responsibility to look after that key. Haley they have a party, by the way. Nathan goes to see Deb in this episode, talks to Haley about it afterwards because he's so upset. But Deb needs somebody looking after her, so Haley comes up with a suggestion. They can just move back into the house with Deb, get rid of the apartment, save money on bills, and look after Deb. They do that, but while they're doing that, they search the apartment, or they search Deb's house for alcohol. They find a bunch of alcohol, decide to have a party. At this party, Rachel obviously been drinking. She gets up on the table. Haley comes in, confronts her about the exam, and slaps Rachel, throws a drink in her face. Skill stands up for Haley. Rachel gets kicked out and then tells Brooke the truth on the way out. All of that's really good. Pretty solid episode. Also, with the Victoria's Secret stuff, Brooke has to get Peyton's permission to use her artwork. So she does, and Peyton's like, yeah, you can have it. I don't want anything from you. Like, just, pretty much accept your friendship, which Nathan and Brooke have a scene later where he's like, isn't it about time that you guys worked it out? And Brooke's like, yeah. So you get the gist in this episode that Brooke's about to, they're about to be friends again. Like, she's going to try to get back into Peyton's life. She really misses her deep down and all of this. But we'll get to that in just a second. Shelley breaks up with Mouth in this episode because she's scared or whatever. And then she ends up going to the party and her and Mouth have sex. And then she breaks up with him again. Just over that character. But feel bad for Mouth, which they just kept him and Gigi together. Dan takes Lucas shopping in the episode to buy a tuxedo. And which is I really like seeing their relationship in this episode. Really, the father and son relationship they could have had. Dan also knows that Lucas didn't take his medicine, and that's why he had the heart attack. But he lets Lucas know that it'll be just a secret between them. Obviously, Karen overhears it, though. And then Dan and Karen have dinner that night where she pretty much shoots him down like, there's nothing going on between us. I'm having the kid of your brothers, but he's like, you're also alone, and I want to be the guy there for you if you need anything. Which then leads us to the end of the episode where he takes her home and pretty much asks her to prom, which she agrees to go. So kind of a little bit back and forth of how she really feels. We're not really sure at that point, but I do like them together in this season. That's about it in the episode until we come to the end, which the end of the episode, obviously I said there was that scene with Nathan and Brooke outside. A lot of people liked the rare interactions that Brooke and Nathan had. They always seemed kind of a bit weird to me, so I wasn't really that big fan of them. But you had one in this episode. Really, it was only in the episode, though, to set up what was about to happen, and that was the fact that they put a video in that says Nathan scores. It's supposed to be him and his basketball high school career. Turns out it's a sex tape, and it's him and Brooke from, I'm going to say, their sophomore year, probably the end of their sophomore year. Because when One Tree Hill starts, it's about, I would say, October of their junior year. So this was either, and the reason I say sophomore year is Nathan definitely doesn't look like he does in the video. In the video, he looks like he does now, and that's because they filmed it now, which bothers me because it's like Nathan definitely didn't look like that in season 1. His hair didn't look like that, but he didn't look like that physically. But because of the hair situation, I'm going to say that this video took place the end of their sophomore year. But it was still while Brooke and Peyton were friends, and Peyton was dating Nathan. Might even be during the summer. Let's say it's that. Let's say it's the summer between their sophomore and junior year. Because we know, I believe that's when he said in the previous episode 413 they started dating, was that summer. Or it might have been the summer before. I'm curious. But yeah, so that's the end of the episode, the big cliffhanger. Obviously, 14, 15, and 16 really go together, but we're talking about 15 and 16 on the next video. The next video, I'll be breaking down the next 4 episodes, which is for 15, 16, 17, and 18. Season 4. 4:18 for me is when it really stuff starts to hit the fan, with the whole Dan situation, the end of the school year, and then we go into the final episodes of the high school, years of One Tree Hill. So that's the episode today, guys, and we'll be back soon with all new episodes. Check out the other videos on the channel as well. We talk about different related movie topics all throughout the week. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks, guys.